What does it take for a discovery to make its way into one of our videos of fantastic finds? Well, there are no set criteria. It just has to be incredible, and we always know incredible when we see it. An element of the unexpected always helps as well, and we hope that you'll agree there are some truly fabulous unexpected finds in this collection. Let's get started. Travel to Laos, and you'll find one of the world's most fascinating, unexplained archaeological sites in the shape of the Plain of Jars. They're all over the country's highlands, mostly focused in the Chiang Kuang Plain. All of them are shaped out of solid rock and range in size between 3 feet tall and 10 feet tall. The largest of them weighs over 10 tons. It's never easy to date rock monuments, but they're believed to have been made around 2,000 years ago, with some estimates going as far as 2,500 years. Nobody so far has been able to prove what the jars were used for, but the most commonly accepted theory is that they were used to house the remains of the dead after funeral rites. The bodies would be placed into the jars, which presumably had lids at one point in the distant past, until the decomposition process was complete and only the skeleton remained. The skeleton would then be retrieved and buried elsewhere. The discovery of personal effects, including clothing, jewelry, and stone carvings around the area of the jars, might back up this idea. You all know what a bullseye on a dartboard looks like, but here's one that you can see from a little further away than the end of an Aki. In fact, this bullseye is so enormous that you can even see it from above the Earth's atmosphere in outer space. It's called the Ricket structure, and it's a geological wonder in Mauritania, right in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Because it's surrounded by so much emptiness, it isn't easy to get a sense of scale from these images, but it is 30 miles wide. Scientific theories about this natural phenomenon have ranged over the years, and there's still some debate among scholars and academics about the origins of the structure today. For a long time, it was thought to be the site of an asteroid impact because of its circular shape, but it's now believed to be a geological dome that's slowly eroding. It's thought that the desert floor blistered and cracked as a bubble of molten magma formed beneath it, and has spent the past few millennia flattening out again as it's weathered by the elements. Are the origins of the Potomsky crater of Irkutsk, Siberia, earthly or extraterrestrial? Nobody knows for sure, and every time someone thinks they've come up with an answer, more evidence is found that challenges their position. The distinctive-looking rock formation takes the shape of a large limestone mound with a ring-shaped crown-like depression at the top. Most rock formations like this are millions of years old, but the Potomsky crater was formed less than 4 centuries ago. Stranger still, all the trees in its immediate vicinity grow faster than the trees further into the forest. One theory is that the crater was caused by a deep pocket of natural gas breaking through the surface of the Earth and shattering the rock, but others believe it's the site of a meteor strike. The gas explanation fits the size and shape of the crater but doesn't explain the rapid tree growth, which some scientists believe may have been caused by radiation. If radiation is the cause, then an extraterrestrial explanation may be more likely, but no source for the radiation has ever been found. Someone must surely have noticed whichever violent event caused the crater to appear a few hundred years ago, so it's odd that it isn't noted in any historical records. Towards the end of the Jurassic era, the sea levels around what's now the coast of Dorset in England dropped, revealing a new island. Soil formed on the island over time, and eventually, the land was covered by a tropical forest. Further shifts in the sea level eventually saw the forest drowned by a saline lagoon, but the remains of the forest were preserved beneath the waters and eventually became fossilized. That's how the fossil forest of Lulworth and Dorset came into existence. It's the most complete fossilized Jurassic-era forest anywhere in the world. The gymnosperm trees on the island, which is now known as the Isle of Purbeck, are about 140 million years old and can be thought of as distant cousins of the modern-day cypress tree. Dendrochronology tests carried out on the trees suggest that they grew up in a Mediterranean climate, thus confirming the tropical forest theory. The remains of the forest are now positioned on a scenic ledge on the edge of a cliff, but it's hard for the public to gain access to them because the cliffs are within a military firing range. Were it not for that, they would probably be a popular tourist destination. When a waterfall gets a nickname like the Devil's Kettle, you know there's going to be a bizarre story about it. The natural feature in Minnesota, USA, has perplexed scientists and enthralled visitors for years for one simple reason. Water cascades down the rocks, enters a pothole, and then seems to simply disappear. Scientists have thrown GPS devices into the pothole to try to trace the exit point of the powerful flow, but they also vanish. All that leaves us with is speculation, with some believing that the water sinks down into the core of the earth. That might make it a portal to hell, hence the nickname. A more likely explanation is that the pressure of the water against the rocks is so great that anything thrown into it, even a tiny GPS tracker, would be crushed and destroyed. That could be true, but it still doesn't explain where the water goes. The most recent scientific theory, which was published in 2017, suggests that the water goes down the kettle and then re-emerges downstream from the falls, eventually re-entering the river from beneath it. That's the least exciting explanation possible, but sadly it's probably also the most likely. For centuries, there has been a Peruvian myth about a boiling river. Only it isn't a myth. It's real. Scientist Andres Russo was skeptical about the idea, but his interest was piqued when his own mother told him that she'd swum in it when she was young. That was enough to send him backpacking into the Amazon in search of it, and he found it. The river sits on a geographic fault line, where heat from within the Earth's crust vents up through the base of the water and heats it almost to the point of boiling. It's potentially deadly and only safe to swim in when rainwater has cooled it down significantly. Russo is now dedicated to ensuring the river is declared a conservation area because, as far as anyone knows, it's the only one of its type in the world. The river is now known as Shenay Timpishka, although it's also sometimes called La Bamba, and can be found within the Mayantuyacu sanctuary of the Huanco High Forest, where it runs for over 4 miles. The shamans of the local Ashaninka community believe that the boiling water comes from a giant serpent spirit known as Yakumana, but the scientific explanation is the correct one. The Hessdalen lights are a known phenomenon that occurs in Norway's Hessdalen Valley between 20 and 30 times a year. We'd call them a natural phenomenon, but we can't say for sure that they happen naturally. In fact, we can't say for sure how they happen at all. The lights can appear anywhere in the 8-mile stretch of the valley, and were first noticed during the 1930s. They can be almost any color and may last a few seconds or a few hours each time they appear. Even more strangely, sometimes they stay in one place, and other times they appear to move rapidly. The best theory scientists have ever come up with on the matter is that the lights are the result of hydrogen, oxygen, and sodium reacting with the large scandium deposits in the Hessdalen Valley to create a completely unique effect, although they've been unable to reproduce the effect under test conditions. It's almost unthinkable that something that occurs so frequently and can be so easily observed defies any rational explanation, and yet the Hessdalen lights continue to appear, defying science every time they do so. The tiny town of Kodini in India isn't much to look at. As towns in the region of Kerala go, it's a fairly nondescript one, but only until you take a closer look at the people living in it. There are about 2,000 families living in Kodini, and within those 2,000 families are around 400 pairs of twins. That would be an amazing statistic anywhere, but it's an especially impressive statistic for India because the country has one of the lowest rates of twin birth in the world. The average arrival rate of twins per birth in India is 9 per 1,000, but in Kodini, it's more like 45 per 1,000. Scientists have no idea what's causing all the twin births, but it certainly isn't IVF. Nobody here could afford to pay for such a treatment. There's nothing unusual in the water here that scientists have been able to identify, and nor is there anything unusual about the typical diet of a person living in Kaudini. The twins simply started appearing as if by magic around 70 years ago, and they're still arriving in record numbers today. We have to rely on artists' impressions to get an idea of what Cahokia, which is close to present-day Collinsville, Illinois, might have looked like during its prime. There are over 120 human-built mounds in the region, one of which is almost 100 feet tall and is the largest prehistoric earthwork in North America. Followers of ancient Mississippian tradition settled here in the year 600, and by 1200 it had a larger population center than London in England. About 20,000 people lived here by that time. A wooden equivalent of England's Stonehenge once stood on the land here, and there are traces of it still visible in the ground today. Much like Stonehenge itself, it's believed to have been erected and used for marking the solstice. There's plenty of evidence of trade and commerce here, but also a few grisly features. One of the mounds contains mutilated human remains, suggesting human sacrifice was commonplace. Based on the positioning of some of the bodies, people may have been buried alive. Cahokia was abandoned somewhere around the year 1400, and no clear reason for the abandonment has ever been determined. For centuries, the existence of Thonis Heraklion was considered to be a myth. Like Atlantis, it was said to be a once mighty Egyptian city that had disappeared beneath the waves. Unlike Atlantis, though, Thonis Heraklion has been found. In the year 2000, divers reported that they discovered ancient Egyptian treasures deep below the waters of Abu Qir Bay, close to Alexandria. Further dives were ordered, and eventually the ruins of an enormous temple, 700 anchors, and 64 ships were identified 3 miles out to sea. 2,300 years after it sank, Thonis Heraklion has been found once more. Even after all this time in the water, the ruins are astonishingly well preserved, thanks in part to the fact that the Egyptians made most of the buildings and sculptures out of granite. Its enormous harbor is so vast that it must have been one of Egypt's biggest trading hubs back when it was accessible. There's evidence of numerous canals crossing the city streets, so it's possible that it might have been a city on water, much like Venice in Italy today. Even though the lost city has now been found, scientists still have no idea why it sank in the first place. Our next amazing find is such a riddle that it challenges the narrative of established history on a global level. It's a gigantic ancient stone head that was discovered in the jungles of Guatemala during the 1950s, but seemed to be impossibly out of place. That's because the features on the face of the sculpture are unmistakably Caucasian, yet there's no way that the pre-Hispanic people who lived in Guatemala could have seen a Caucasian face before if the history we're taught in schools is correct. It's likely that the Olmec people created the head, as they created several similarly sized heads in the area 3,000 years ago, all of which are positioned so the face looks toward the sky just like this one does. But none of the others have Caucasian features. This one is unique. Frustratingly, the statue was severely damaged during armed conflicts within the country around a decade after this now infamous photo was taken, making further study impossible. The picture of the giant stone head taken by Dr. Oscar Rafael Padilla Lara has been confirmed as being authentic though, and the mystery of how it could have been created remains unsolved. The big question about Mel's Hole is whether it exists at all. This discovery might be an urban legend, but we'll let you decide. In February 1997, a man named Mel Waters appeared as a guest on a radio show called Coast to Coast AM, which is a popular and confusingly named late-night talk show that's popular in America. According to Mel, he lived on a rural property close to Ellenburg in Kittitas County, Washington, and on his land was a hole more than 80,000 feet deep. Mel said he only knew the hole was that deep because 80,000 feet was the point at which he ran out of fishing line to measure it with. Not only was the hole impossibly deep, but it also had magical properties. Mel claimed that the body of his neighbor's dead dog was thrown into the hole, only for the dog to turn up alive the following day. The same guest made repeat appearances in 2000 and 2002 to repeat his story, insisting it was true. Nobody believed him until a Native American called Gerald R. Osborne, also known as Red Elk, claimed in 2012 to have known of the hole for years and said he visited it regularly for medicinal purposes. There's no record of a Mel Waters ever living in Kittitas County, but why would Red Elk lie to back up Mel's claim?
Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!